Let's get more now on our main story, and let's talk to Jason Bordoff, who is founding director of the Center of Global Energy Policy at Columbia University and was White House energy advisor to President Obama and is in New York. And Jason, thanks for joining us here on BBC News. Of course, we've talked about what the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said. He's blaming Iran for these drone strikes. But the fact of the matter remains, whoever is behind them, this disruption is going to be significant, at least in the short term.
That's right. It's a hugely consequential disruption. Nearly 6 million barrels a day of oil supply. That's a huge loss to the global market. The key really is how long this will persist. And we don't know exactly the answer to that, but the more information we get suggests that it may not be days, it may be weeks or even longer. That would be a huge shock to the global oil market. It would certainly mean higher oil prices, and it would probably mean countries tap their strategic oil stocks, and even that probably won't be enough.
How different do you think, though, the US's response is at the moment, given that it's no longer a net oil importer?
Well, I think the rhetoric from the U.S. has suggested that would be the case, but if global oil prices spike, consumers in the United States and as in every other country are about to be reminded that it doesn't matter how much oil you import. Oil prices are set in the global market and pump prices are set in the global market. And so the fact that we are about on the verge of being a net zero oil importer, which is a huge turnaround, doesn't change the fact that consumer prices at the pump are going to spike, and that's going to have political repercussions. And that's going to mean that countries want to do something to bring those consumer prices down.
And of course, that's the last thing President Trump is going to want, right?
Well, it's the last thing that President Trump wants. Obviously, we know from his Twitter account and other statements that he definitely prefers lower oil prices to higher oil prices. At the same time, he also is pursuing a strategy of maximum pressure on Iran. And part of the reason for this spike in oil prices is that we've pulled Iranian supply off the market. And the potential for this kind of, we don't quite yet know who was behind it, whether it's Houthi proxies or Iran directly, but the potential for this to escalate into broader regional conflict that pushes oil prices up yet further is something markets and consumers are going to need to consider as well.
Yes, because there's going to have implications, isn't it, on Iranian oil sanctions?
It may have implications. I mean, again, on the one hand, if this supply disruption persists, you would want those Iranian barrels to come back to the market to help offset that supply loss. But I think we've seen from this President and Secretary of State Pompeo, who said today that there should be Iran will be held accountable for this aggression, that the goal of maximum pressure may even outweigh the goal of lower oil prices for the United States.
How much do you think something like this underlines the global over-reliance on, a particular plant? How much does this tell us about the oil market and the way it works?
Well, it's a 100 million barrel a day market. That's a lot of oil. But we should remember that, small changes really can matter a lot. And Saudi is one of, now with the United States and Russia, largest suppliers to the market. This is probably the most important oil facility in the world. And even though 5 million barrels a day may not sound like a lot in a market with 100 million barrel a day, changes of just 1, 2, 3 million barrels a day can cause a huge move in the price. And we're operating in a market now with much less spare capacity. So the countries, mostly Saudi Arabia, that hold a little bit of oil back just in case the global market needs it in the event of a disruption. One important question here is whether the damage to the Abqaiq facility is going to limit the ability for Saudi to bring some of those other supplies back, because, of course, they've cut production with the recent OPEC agreement. If the disruption were anywhere else, Saudi could bring some of that supply back, but it's a question about whether they can do that with their own disruption.
Yes, that is interesting, isn't it? Jason Bordoff, it's so good to talk to you. Thank you so much.